Welcome, podcasting to the entirety of the Super Smash Bros. Community. This is Beyond the Metagame. I'm your host, Peon, this week live from, may God have mercy on our souls, the Great Cave Offensive. And I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, AV. AV, how you doing, big guy?
I never wanted to end up here, man. Great Cave Offensive. I think I'm still playing the friendly that I started here last year.
I mean, it's definitely not a misnomer. I've never seen something more offensive than that stage. Sakurai really just... his wife pissed him off as he walked out the door, and he just was like, ugh. Took all his anger on us, I think, that day. Yeah. But here we are. This week, AV and I are going to be talking about burnout. What are the symptoms? What causes burnout? And most importantly, how do we fix burnout?
I think what the first thing we're going to get into is, what are the symptoms of burnout? And I think really to kind of get into the mentality of talking about this, we should kind of talk about a lot of the situations that we've seen, like obvious ones and not so obvious ones in our Smash community where people have experienced this. I think one of the most common things is to see people like talk about on social media about how the game is becoming a destructive element of their life and how they want to quit, or how they want to stop taking it so seriously, or how they're kind of focusing everything on the next game and pinning that pinning all of their hopes and dreams on that. And not to say that there's anything wrong with any of this. If there's a toxic element in your life and you really feel like it's a problem, you should try your best to remove it. But I think there's a lot of things that people haven't explored, and in terms of the psychology and the introspection behind why is this game becoming such a toxic part of our life.
Right, and I think there's a big distinction to draw there, right? You talked about that, people get to this point where subconsciously the game becomes less and less fun for them, and then there's a tipping point, right? And they identify the game as this source of toxicity and something that's not fit for their happiness. It doesn't factor into the equation, so they choose to remove it like a tumor. And I think what we're advocating for is not crazy medical treatment. It's preventative treatment. We're telling you, don't go to the doctor. You don't need to go to the doctor if you just go jogging every day. Like if you eat a salad once in a while. That's what we're appealing. That's what we're advocating for. Would you say so, AV?
I think there's a lot of situations where we're very drawn towards cold turkey solutions that are very immediate, solutions that have some kind of instant gratification. The human brain is very drawn towards instant gratification. I think understanding that is one of the most important things to, I think, improving as a person in general. All changes, I will say most changes, to be perfectly to not have a logical fallacy there, but most changes are made over time. Most changes in your life, in your playstyle, in your mentality, in the game, out of the game, are made gradually. This is a very obvious statement. People know this, but it's also one that people don't take to heart. I think it's really important that people understand that the process to removing toxicity from your life with the game is a very gradual process. And I think what we're going to talk about is like, how do you kind of catch it before it happens? I think that's one of the really important things. How do you know if you have it? If you know you have it, and then how do you work on fixing it? I think that's where we're going to start, and then we're gonna transition into some of the more specific scenarios.
So all that and more coming up soon. Welcome back to Beyond the Metagame with Peon and AV. This week, we're talking about Burnout. And AV, you were earlier implying and talking about how Burnout's something that creeps up on you gradually, slowly. It can sweep under the radar undetected. What are some of the first steps in identifying burnout? How do you detect it's there before it becomes a huge issue? And how do you identify it in general, like among your friends or your competitors?
Sure, I think there's a lot of I think it's very case specific, but I think some of the more general things to look out for are some things like uh are you getting very agitated in friendlies? Uh it's actually really good. In my opinion, it's really good to take friendlies seriously. I personally take them at least like fairly seriously whenever I'm playing because I really enjoy improving at the game, and I love looking at the game critically, even when I'm playing "quote unquote" for nothing on the line. However, if you start to get really irritated and very angry at yourself in the game, or even worse at your opponent in friendlies, it's probably a sign that you're easily kind of emotionally easily emotionally swayed by small things, especially because friendlies is such a low risk environment, and kind of minimizing these emotional swings is what is really important for improving. I think if I had to boil most of the precursors to burnout down, it's probably really strong emotional swings. And like I said before, this has a lot to do with instant gratification. The human mind is very drawn towards instant gratification, and we love it. So the problem is that when we're kind of having this like high low cycle, that we basically get like really like strong emotions from our victories, and we're like and we're on cloud nine, and then then if we SD 5 times in friendlies, we kind of just lose it. What happens is that we get into this really destructive mentality, and we aren't ever able to set reasonable goals for ourselves because we're so afraid of failure.
Yeah, sure. I think you really hit it on the head. Where a lot of times, like you said, Smash Four specifically, but this is true in all Smash games. Um, some days you just really don't play that well. Maybe you'll do great at a tournament. You have a breakout performance. You'll place higher than you normally do. Everybody's giving you props. You're loving yourself, and then you come next week and you do much worse than expected. Everything suddenly, you're doubting yourself. Was last week a fluke? Am I actually improving? And it starts to perpetuate this feedback loop where, like you said, when you're playing friendlies and you're trying to chase that high again, and you're trying to get back to where you were, but it's in the pursuit of that instant gratification of trying to return to that high. You really start to not enjoy the process anymore, and you start to resent the grind, and which prevents you from achieving those highs, again in the future, long term.
Yeah, definitely. I think you really have a good point about this like resentment that kind of builds up in us as we start to not get like get toward the goals that we kind of set for ourselves. I think just it's real when you start realizing that you're not having fun in friendlies or bracket. In my opinion, you should be at least having like when you get out of a bracket game, when you get out of a tournament game, like win or lose. I'm not saying you should be excited if you lose, but you should at least feel some sort of there should still be some sort of like recognition in your brain for the fact that it's like, hey, I gave it my all. I played a solid game. And if you didn't, recognizing that and moving on from it. And there should be this kind of like very like there should be, at least to some extent. I know not everyone can break it down so logically, but there should always be this like this kind of voice in your head saying this is what I did, this is how I get to my goals, this is how this is what I feel about it. If you don't allow yourself some time to logically break down what just happened, and you kind of have this emotional like storm going on, what happens is that you start negatively associating. Uh, your brain literally starts negatively associating Smash tournaments and bracket games and losing with but yeah, it just you just create a negative association with Smash and you. Like it's just kind of a crazy thing.
Sure, you see that manifested in so many ways. I think primarily the way that I see it manifest most often is when people that at one point felt so much joy around specifically entering tournaments, of that improvement, of that grind, of that recognition of doing well, where they used to have so much joy is now replaced by apathy. People are like, maybe I'm not going to enter this week. I don't know. I'm just not really feeling it. Generic statements like that. And I really think it's a result of burnout. People have pushed themselves too far emotionally, sometimes even physically, and when it shows up, I think it most often takes the form of apathy.
Definitely. I think not caring, or even worse, pretending not to care, which is actually usually the case. It's kind of hard to just immediately stop caring about anything, but
Right.
pretending, yeah, pretending not to care about how you do, or saying that you don't care how you play in tournament, sandbagging, really common. Basically, removing expectations from yourself,
Big one.
yeah, artificially removing expectations from yourself, instead of setting more reasonable goals, or kind of finding more things outside of Smash that you find that you can rely on to reduce expectations. Kind of dismissing the PR and saying it's invalid or not important. I think those are all like really common symptoms too.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like this. People will maybe they'll show up on a PR, and then a couple seasons, maybe the next season, they don't return to the PR. They performed not as well as they had the previous season relative to the rest of the community, and then that next season, they almost seem like grizzled war veterans looking back at their accomplishments, like, oh, it was all meaningless in the first place. Why did anybody ever care? Like, really these cynical veterans, and it's a pattern that's very very often observed, and both on like a local and national level, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it. I've definitely seen it on Twitter. I've seen pro players do the same thing. Seen that absolute same thing mirrored in our region, in players from across regions. This isn't something unique to a specific community. This is very common in not only just esports, but also any regular competitive environment. And I think this is a nice kind of transition point into like basically we've identified it now. What causes it? Uh, I think one of the first things that I think you can talk to really well is attending too many tournaments, or yeah. Why
Yeah.
don't you kind of just jump into what is it? How do you feel when you attend too many events?
Yeah, well, a big distinction between AV and I is AV is very self-aware. He doesn't ever overbook himself. He's very meticulous in terms of, at least when it comes to Smash. He goes to tournaments at a very balanced, respectable pace. But sometimes the peon on any given weekend, the peon play might be to enter 2, 3 tournaments. One time, namely, me and AV were talking about this before we went live, saying I went to Breakthrough down in Long Beach, 2GG Breakthrough, and then that night, me and my lovely carpool drove all the way up to Fresno, and for you non-Californians, it's like a 4 or 5 hour drive. And again, we all expected Buster and Pools, but I made top 8, so we were there until like midnight, and we got to our hotel at 4 a.m. in Fresno, and slept for 3 hours. Woke up the next morning to do 8 a.m. pool at SoundCal Standoff. And the short story is I did not play so well, AV, and that's an understatement. I was like moving at 1 mile an hour. I couldn't remember where the C stick was. It was all bad, man. And anyway, after that tournament, Sakurai knows that I did not want to touch a GameCube controller for a long time. And yeah, I think I will cite that because it was just too much, man. It sometimes it's fun to go crazy, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's a lot like I guess for it's a lot like basically doing anything in excess, whether it's consumption of of alcohol. Well, you usually know like what the or just basically enjoy or basically playing video games, or like it's like how much should you play? Should you stay up all night playing,
Right.
or it's like or should you moderate yourself? This isn't a very like deep topic. Moderation is such an it's such like a obvious thing, right? It's like we
Sure.
it's like we're so trained to accept it. It's like if someone says, "Oh yeah, you need to do something in moderation," and it's like, yeah, duh, like everyone knows that, but implementing it is a whole different story.
And I think a big reason why, at least in terms of Smash, is for a lot of Smashers, Smash is their thing. You know, they really identify with the hobby. It's one of their most favorite things about life. And when all your friends are Smashers, and that's your entire social life for some people, which is totally fine and healthy. But it does lead to situations where, look, if all my friends are playing tournaments, what other option do I have? And I know plenty of people who can relate to that, I think. And that's why I think something that you stress a lot, Av, is you know ideally you want to have multiple interests. Not everybody does, so you really have to self moderate if Smash is your only thing or your main thing, right? You really have to self moderate.
I definitely agree. I as you've said, I'm a huge advocate of kind of having a few things. Obviously, you don't want to spread yourself too thin. We can get into that in a bit, but I do want to kind of wrap up the whole idea of like moderation, not attending too many tournaments, not overplaying the game. I think that's something that definitely causes burnout. Overplaying the game, basically just kind of being it. It leads to really brainless friendlies. It leads to you kind of just mindlessly grinding. And I think one of the craziest things, believe it or not, is that when you play the game so much and practice so inefficiently, because you've played the game so much, your brain actually expects you to be better the next time you attend a tournament, when in reality you could have stayed the same or even got worse relative to your competitors.
Hmm. So will you walk me through what about that process you think of just grinding for the sake of grinding for killing time? Can you walk me through why you think that damages your tournament performance?
Of course. I think there's a few. This is also a really complex topic. One of the things to talk about is what is your diversity of who you're playing against. If you're grinding against the same person for 5 hours every day, how much are you going to learn about the game? Are you going to be looking at the game in different ways? Is it going to force your brain to change the way that it thinks? Believe it or not, when your brain is stressed and is put in a new environment, that is when your brain is able to learn the most. That is when it's a psychological term known as neuroplasticity. It basically, in layman's terms, it's basically the idea that how much can your brain input, change, and improve. The whole point is that if you're not changing your environment, if you're not like actively pursuing to be uncomfortable, or actively pursuing to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, the amount that you're going to learn will be less, and you will be learning at a much slower rate.
Of course, and to tie that back to what you said originally, if you don't acknowledge that and if you don't contextualize, um, you know, how you're playing the game while you're playing it, perhaps later, like you said, you'll go to a tournament like, I've been playing all week. I'm about to be killing it today, and then your performance is relatively the same as it normally is, and then you get really down on yourself. It's like, well, I played for all this time. Why isn't that not being reflected in my placing? And I think that really ties into the idea of unhealthy goals. I think that's a huge actor in what causes burnout for many people. A lot of people will say, you know what, I'm going to be the number one in my region. Or, you know what, I'm going to be the best Donkey Kong in Puerto Rico, or I don't know. And I think that results based goals as opposed to progress based goals are soul crushing to a lot of people, especially the younger people that don't have as much experience just in life in general. Because some people will say, I'm gonna do this, and then when it isn't reflected in the results, you have two options, right? You can either A, keep fighting, keep persevering, take the long road ahead, or shrug it off, make excuses, and pretend to be apathetic about it, and to just to become disinterested with it altogether, and kind of cope and deflect and defend yourself from actually having to face the music. So I think it's important to set goals such as, you know what, I'm going to have fun with the game, or you know what, I'm going to practice in this way, I'm going to learn this matchup, I'm going to learn different combos against this character, and have nice, easy, obtainable goals that will improve your progress.
I absolutely agree. I think there's actually one point that it seems a little more complicated that we might need to break down a little more, is the idea of setting a goal to have fun with the game. I actually think that's very, very difficult to do by just saying it. It's one of those things that it can't force it. You can't force fun. Having fun for a lot of people, like you talked about, for a lot of people, this is kind of the main thing in their life, and it's just totally cool. It's a really fun hobby. It brings people together. It's not really surprising that for some people this is a huge part of their life. This is a huge part of it like is and was a huge part of my life too, but obviously not one of the only things. And I think having fun with the game sometimes is equivalent to winning, or feeling that, or kind of getting money from a tournament, or getting on the PR, which is why I think I totally agree with the idea of setting really reasonable goals. However, I think that kind of setting a goal to have fun with the game is actually sometimes a little destructive because there's no clear direction. What do you think about that?
We have our first disagreeal on Beyond the Metagame. Well, okay, so I think I agree with you actually. Let me rephrase. I think that I'll make it a bit more nuanced. I think that saying something like, I want to have more fun is actually very similar to saying I want to win, right? It is a result based goal. It's saying this is where I want to end up. You're right. So I think what I mean by that is, let's say, I'm Peon. The way I have fun with the game is by cracking open a couple cold ones and playing with some good friends, and just like de-stressing, just body bagging them, just like comboing them, just kind of disrespecting them. That's how I have the most fun. So do that. Invite some friends over, combo them, have a couple of cold ones, and have a really healthy relationship with the game. Understand what I like about it, and practice that. That's what I mean.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't disagree with that. I can't remember a bad time I've had with you, cracking open some cold ones and playing. I think you're definitely the go-to person for that. I think that's what I attribute actually a lot to why I enjoy the game so much. I think creating those relationships and kind of finding ways to enjoy it outside of competitive contexts, I think is also something really important to talk about, that we kind of like naturally transition to. But we can't really understate overstate how important it is to not have unhealthy goals. saying I think for me, obviously I don't want to like kind of equate basically my experiences with completely different experiences that you guys might be having. But if you want kind of like an inside look into how I think about it, it's really, I actually set no goals for myself. It's not a great, it's not good for improvement. I will say that. However, on this extreme, like I'm never disappointed. Like it's and the thing is, I it was never my goal to become number one in Santa Barbara. It kind of just happened. It it came from me, like it just came from me playing. Obviously, I was really interested in competing, and I was, and I guess my goal was to kind of keep improving on PR, but it wasn't any general number. It was just kind of general improvement, kind of keep just keep just kind of keep up with what I was doing. And I kind of was just mindlessly, I somehow just like kind of entered this flow and just got there without having to set any concrete
Well,
goals.
that's what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating
Yeah.
for people saying, yeah, not to achieve a rank, but just to improve. And I think you're being humble, but you did that. I mean, I saw AV. He really practiced what we preached. He would schedule play sessions with pretty much everybody in our entire community. Would learn everything about them. Would learn about their characters. Would really challenge himself, would impose challenges on himself and the other person, and he would kind of level each other up. And it was a very methodical, process-oriented checklist where he just kind of learned a bunch of different scenarios, and he was able to apply that in tournament. But it just happened to coincide with your natural personality and tendency. You didn't think,
Yeah.
you didn't plan to do that. It's kind of how you enjoyed playing the game, and
Yeah, it's really funny. Like, so sorry, sorry to interrupt, but it's like really funny because every time I kind of talk about myself, I always talk about, yeah, I didn't, or like just in general, whenever I talk about myself, I'm like, yeah, I kind of just did whatever. But no, thank you for
yeah.
contextualizing a little. I sometimes do a really bad job of kind of providing context for my achievements.
No worries, man. And I kind of want to pivot. I mean, I still want to talk about, we're under the umbrella of what causes burnout, still, and I really just want to touch on like circumstantial changes in life in general, outside of the game, right? A lot of people, they'll stop playing because maybe their local tournament scene shut down. The venue closed, the weeklies aren't happening consistently. Maybe they're pregnant, and they got a baby now, and they're like, I can't be. This is a kids game. I can't be doing this. And so because they're wrapped in these, they're thinking about other distractions outside of the game, thinking about, like it's in the back of their mind, kind of nagging at them. We'll stick with the pregnancy example. Like, I'm gonna be having a kid soon. Should I really be taking this kids game seriously? Is this they have that doubt in their mind, and they go to a tournament and then they don't do very well, and it kind of reinforces. It's kind of confirmation bias in terms of it reinforces the negative thought that they already had in the back of their head. Can you relate to this at all? Do you think anything of this, or am I just talking?
I think it would be a stronger thing to say that I know people who would relate to this.
Mm,
I don't want to say, I don't want to claim to personally relate with any of these situations because obviously I haven't had to deal with anything this. I've been blessed with not having to deal with anything on this level, but I do know people who've had kind of significant life changes, and I think that's actually a really hard topic because to talk about, because there's some cases in which the right decision is, all right, I'm not, as say, is to stop playing Smash competitively.
sure.
Obviously we don't want to, it's hard for us to kind of advocate that with kind of how it's like our podcast is all about kind of having a strong mentality, having a strong psychological approach to the game, and being like very conscious and introspecting about ourselves and making and being our best selves. However, sometimes sometimes life just happens, and that happens to be the decision that makes the most sense or is forced upon you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think this is I think in those cases it's kind of hard to talk about. I think what would be interesting is talking about. Let's talk. I think the perspective that I think we should talk about is from a extreme but slightly less extreme example. Like let's just say your girlfriend broke up with you. Your girlfriend boyfriend broke up with you. How do you how do you make sure that your role in the competitive Smash scene and your progress and your improvement is not hindered by this?
Yeah, that that is that is a better example. I'll be the first to admit it. But yeah, no, I think that's really relatable. I mean, I don't think most Smashers ever obtain a significant other in the first place, so maybe it isn't a bit no. But uh, seriously though, I do think that that's a great example, and I think that um, the most important thing I think is to be self aware, right? In this specific instance. So, of course, when you exit a relationship, it's going to be weighing on you like a wet blanket. You're going to be carrying it with you, and tournaments are no exception. You'll be carrying the outside baggage in bracket, and when you lose, you'll connect that negativity to the negativity that you're wearing. When you walk into the venue, and I think it's really important to be. I don't. I think it's impossible to avoid, but I think it's important to contextualize this negativity and to understand. Look, I love the game. This is a thing that I derive joy from, and I need to keep it that way. And I need to look. My situation sucks. I'm very sad, and it's very logical that I am sad, but I can't bring this into Smash. Maybe I'm not gonna have the tournament of my life, but I know it's not the game's fault, and I'm surrounded by a community that likes me and a hobby that brings me fulfillment, and I have to, just remember that, keep that in mind.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head of what the ideal mentality should be. Uh, I am gonna throw you a bit of a hardball
Ooh,
and say and say that often the case, not only this mentality something of dreams, it is very often it is very often very difficult for people to introspect like that. How would you recommend someone building their introspective capabilities?
how would I recommend someone handle that?
How would you recommend someone like build their ability to look at situations and break them down logically?
Sure, that might just be the. You might have asked me what the meaning of life is. You might as well.
Yeah,
No,
possibly.
I think that is an important question relative to Smash and relative to Burnout. So I'm glad you asked that, because introspection is a huge part of all of this. Because and I will answer your question, but uh, you know, something to take something that you love and to turn it into something you hate and to be burnt out by it is something that requires a certain lack of self-awareness and introspectiveness. What's the word? Introspectivity? I don't know.
Sure.
We'll say introspectiveness. Um, because it isn't logical. If you love something, you probably love it for concrete reasons. And for you to grow to detest it and to resent it takes some mental missteps. And so let's say, you're not somebody that's very well practiced in thinking in these terms and to holding yourself accountable and to tracking your own thought processes. It's important to understand that your brain is dynamic. It's constantly changing. You're constantly being influenced by everything around you. Um, and you should always consider how everything is affecting your mindset, how everything is affecting your mood, and how it all works together. So I would really just invite you to practice thinking about everything in the simplest of terms. Why do I do this? Why does it make me happy? What's important to me? And contextualizing all of this in those terms.
I think you've done a really good job of breaking down kind of a hard question and kind of laying down the framework for how to build this up. I think I'm just going to jump off of your last point there. That's kind of actually what you described there is something called mindfulness. I don't know if you directly or unconsciously realize that you're doing that, but yeah, being mindful of everything that we do. Mindfulness is something that is practiced, not kind of immediately that we immediately get, and it's kind of and these skills are kind of built up through basically constantly going through these motions when times are good, and not only when times are bad. I think that's
Mm.
kind of the key. That's kind of the key here is like you said, being able to break everything down to really simple things like what makes me happy, why am I doing this, why it's like what am I getting out of this. But doing that not only when you're at your lowest, but doing it when you're at your best, because it just like you've when you practice something in friendlies, if you don't go for that really hard tech or that really difficult maneuver in friendlies, for sure you're not going to hit it in tournament.
Mm.
Just like that, that if you can't practice being introspective, being mindful, and being kind of self-aware when you're really happy, for sure you're not going to do it when you're sad.
I mean, that was the most beautiful Smash Brothers analogy I've ever had the gift of witnessing. Thank you for that.
Of course, man.
So yeah, I mean, we're already kind of hitting it on the head, uh, but I want to focus. I want to change the focus to the solution. How does a player that's burned out, or like you were just getting at, any Smash player who potentially could burn out, focus on how to prevent it and how to stay engaged with the hobby that they've chosen to pursue? Um, I know you're big on exercise, self care. I know you wanted to talk about it. So, Avi, tell me, what do you think exercise and self care has to do with burnout?
All right, I'm gonna go on a bit of a bit of an example here. we're
I'm ready.
gonna so
I'm strapped in.
we're gonna look at the most swole people in Sencoast.
Okay.
Who are the most swole people in Sencoast? It is you.
We'll kind of contextualize. If you're not from the
Yeah.
Central Coast, Avi and I belong to a community in California. It's called the Central Coast. It's a very large region. It's bigger than some states.
Yeah, it goes from Santa Barbara to Santa Maria to San Luis Obispo, and
Ventura to Santa Barbara.
oh right, yeah, we got our Ventura bros in there. It's kind of the kind of hubs are Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and UCSB. Those are kind of the nodes that really connect all of the people in both regions, and that's where most of the events are held.
And so you're asking me, or was this I have that was
Yeah,
this were you gonna
yeah.
answer it yourself?
Yeah, I was kind of gonna answer myself, but it's not. It's kind of weird that the people who are the most buff in Sencoast happen to be all in the top five. It's weird. Not to like. I mean, it's like the people that openly like talk about working out. Who's that? It's me, you, and Levi, also known as Coasty. Us three have pretty much been around the. You two have been solidly in the top five. I've been around top five in the Central Coast. And is there like a legitimate correlation there? Obviously, it's only 3 data points, but I have like kind of like huge thing. If you don't have something to kind of hold you down outside the game, especially something as basic as exercise, you're not going to be able to derive as much fun from the game as you possibly can. I think this is really, I think, kind of jumping into the idea of not only why is exercise important for your life, but also why just kind of diversifying everything that you do is just really important for Smash and for life in general. First of all, exercise is really important for your mental health. It releases dopamine. It basically allows you to live longer. It makes your heart work better. It just makes your mind a lot sharper. exercise does a lot of huge things for you, and it absolutely will improve your Smash game. I sound like a YouTube one of those gym buffs on YouTube, but it's absolutely true. Why don't you jump into this? Say, do you feel like exercise helps your Smash game?
Yeah, yeah. Well, absolutely. I think anybody
Hmm.
that exercises regularly will say that. I think that people agree too often on this point for there not to be some kernel of truth in it. The reasons I would cite for it really helping out my Smash game and also just like my gaming, my video game performance in general, right? Is it really teaches you discipline and meditation and reflection. You have a period of time where it's just you and your thoughts, and like you said, you're just getting flooded with dopamine, and it kind of allows you to balance, to center yourself, and I think that's important. I think that um, Smash is a game that could be so emotional. You could be one frame off. I mean, just this weekend, I lost a tournament because I was one frame away from an up air to finishing touch read, and I was one frame slow, and I lost the tournament. And that kind of thing is it's a very emotional moment, very very charged, and I think that you need to balance those kind of moments with moments of reflection, of no emotion, of nothing going on in your mind, except for just like focusing on your own happiness, your own health. I think that you need to balance it out.
Yeah, I think that was an incredible kind of summary of the mental basically the mental benefits of exercise. That was kind of incredible that like how well you summed that up. I was kind of I gave kind of the physical benefits to it and how it directly affects you, and I think you did a really good job of summing that up. I agree with everything you said, and kind of just jumping back to just kind of wrap up the physical elements of why it's really good for you. It actually increases your reaction times too. It help well it de- sorry decreases your reaction times. It improves how it improves the connections that your body that your nerve connections. It basically exercises the it basically improves the time that your body tells you to do things, which is absolutely important in gaming.
So it makes you better, but how does it fix burnout?
It so yeah, that's actually a really good point. How do we tie tie this back into burnout? This is more of a thing that kind of just makes you better at the game. This is if you're better at the game, you're gonna burn out less.
Well,
like,
I think it
but
speaks to the larger point of
yeah,
of when Smash is the only thing that it's the only progress that you're charting. I
yeah,
mean, usually people have a job or they're all a student and they play Smash,
yeah.
and so they're charting themselves in that way too. But having an additional extracurricular linear path of success to follow, you're kind of diversifying your mental stock portfolio, right? And
Yeah.
you're accounting for us. You have a safety valve. Maybe you're not doing too well in Smash, but you have a goal that you're setting and that you're accomplishing elsewhere. The gym's a great place to accomplish goals, and it doesn't have to be the gym. It could be playing volleyball or whatever, doing some. And the reason that I think that we're going to physical activity as something to cite is because it's universal. Everybody benefits from it, right? It could be knitting, it could be archery, it could be whatever. But I think it's important to, like I said, diversify your mental portfolio and to not put all your eggs in one basket, because when you don't succeed at Smash and that's everything that you focus on, your entire life is a failure. If it's what you identify as, your success in the game is your success as a person.
Absolutely. I'm me. I that I'll agree with everything you said because I'm a huge advocate of doing things, of having like a lot of hobbies, and like you said beautifully, diversifying your basically your interest portfolio. You have a bunch of things that you have to kind of hit this really nice balance of having about two or three things you take really seriously, so that when you feel like you're hitting a plateau in one thing, you can kind of get the mental rewards and and the dopamine and and the positive reinforcement from your improvements in something else. And that is such a good point. It is absolutely what I accredit. a lot of my success to.
That's
I
awesome.
yeah, I think it's like I've said it in some of the previous episodes. We I have always had a lot of things outside of Smash. Not to say that it wasn't like a priority in my life, but it was always really important for me to have like a really active basically be really active with exercise. It was really important to kind of focus on my grades, focus on studying, so that when I get what is that if I get good grades on my tests, I'm not going to care that I kind of busted at a tournament. If I if I did if it's like and then I'd kind of like think about like other hobbies. I played drums in college. If I felt like I was improving at drums, if I felt like if I played particularly well one day at practice, I suddenly didn't care as much that I couldn't ledge trump for the life for the life of me.
Yeah, no, sure. I think that's a great point. And I think that going along with that, when you have these other interests, when you prioritize other aspects of life in addition to Smash, Smash still remains that little slice of escapism. Not everything is as fun as playing Smash. I don't think that working out or studying is as fun as playing Smash, right? And it still allows Smash to not be an arduous, laborious exercise and time waste. It becomes a treat that you give yourself, something that you can submerge yourself and be surrounded by, but still in a healthy way. Treat Smash like it's a dessert, not like it's the cornerstone of your diet, right?
Yeah. I vibe with that so much. I think that's I think you've really encapsulated what what someone who wants to make Smash a really positive influence in their life really should focus on. That's it's not there's some people who no matter what are always going to strive to be the best. I am the last person who would tell you not to do that. I would not discourage you from that quest. If you are going to all in on Smash and you're going to and you're going to put and you're going to put a lot of your a lot of your eggs in that basket or even all of them, and that is your goal, you must where we've kind of laid the risks out for you, but it would be but it's kind of a noble goal. It's a noble thing to achieve absolute greatness. However, for the majority of people whose goals aren't like that aren't that strong, and they don't completely center their life around that specific goal. I think an approach like the one that we just discussed is really conducive to not only positive learning environments and friendlies and tournament settings, but also to just really enjoying the game, and like you said, treating it as this escape, this beautiful like
Medium
uh
of self impression.
yeah, I love, you know what I really love? I love the verb submerged. It's like when you go you when you play Smash, make it so that you're submerging yourself and going to Atlantis.
Hmm.
Not not like you're basically going to the next circle of hell.
Yes.
I you when you're we want to be creating this environment, this community to basically encourage very to encourage it as something that's just a very positive experience in your life. And I think, funny enough, even when you think you're taking focus off from Smash, you'll find that you're improving. Now, why is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back into what we're talking about. I think even if you want to be the best, perhaps on a different scale, but still very importantly, you need to ration your brain space. You need to take time to put to put other priorities of your life right in front of you. You know, you have to diversify even a little bit. You know, even if you're Tweak or MKLeo, you still have to have some time to step away from the game. You know, you have to have a release valve, and I think that one of the biggest correlative factors in improving at the game is enjoying the game. If you want to be the best, you have to love it the most, and you're gonna hate the game if you don't take some of the stuff we talked about into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to kind of sum up there, I think we've kind of really, I think we've done a really good job of summing that up in terms of kind of hitting things outside of Smash. I think there's still a lot to talk about it, even though we've discussed a lot about how much it can do for you. I really don't think it can be overstated how important it is. I think to kind of just give some last closing anecdotes. I'm sure you've you remember this. The two best tournaments that I remember, one of them I was complaining that I had to leave the entire time. I,
uh,
I was I had zero expectations. I just needed to get going, and I placed really well at a really stacked tournament because I just had no I had zero expectations on myself. And I was focused on other things. And the other tournament is when I was like is when I also had to leave that day. I think I also had to get going. It's like it's weird. It's not just I think it's also not. I think that kind of brings up a nice point about it's not also just having things outside of Smash. It's just understanding what expectations mean. And I think that is actually could be the topic for an entire episode.
well, maybe I'm happy. I look forward to delving into that topic as well as many others. But as for now, it appears that our time is running short. So I'm doing some quick housekeeping. You can find us on Twitter at Beyond Metagame. Wait, is that right?
Yes, that is right.
Beyond Metagame. Thank you, AB. You can find myself at Peon, Peon underscore GCE, as in Golf Charlie Echo. You can find AV. AV, you recently just changed your tag, did you not? What is it now?
I have not. It's still A and then AV and then my incredibly long last name, which
You know what?
if you're
Follow.
so inclined if you're so inclined to follow me, you can find that on our on Beyond Metagames Twitter,
Yes.
or you could find that on our podcast description.
Yes, you can. And also, I would like to invite you guys to tweet at Beyond Metagame. Ask us a question. I can't promise that we'll answer every question, but at least in the early goings, I'm sure we'll answer a lot of the good ones anyway. I really want to uh, take some of your anecdotes and incorporate them into the episode. You know, learn from what other people are thinking about the topics that we're talking about, because I think everybody in the Spanish community will and can relate to the stuff that we talk about.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Getting some input, getting some questions that you want us to answer, that you think we'd have good insight on, is would be really helpful for us, not only to kind of get a vibe of what the community feels, and to kind of understand what are the really important issues that you want discussed.
In the future, we're going to be inviting on guests. We're going to be talking about lots of topics. Oh, feel free to suggest topics too, again, at Beyond Metagame. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. This has been Beyond the Metagame. And we really appreciate you sitting down and listening to us chat. AV, it's been a pleasure, my man.
Yeah, likewise.
Take care, guys.